that we don't have our chief technical officer here, Dieter. He was on, and the magic gremlins in Zoom or the internet or somewhere have taken him out. So he's working on joining us here in just a few minutes. So you're stuck with me and my able assistants here, Diane Hansen, Elaine Nadelin, and Eric Larson up there in the, well, you might not be in the top there. So anyway, welcome. This is Fearless Flight Live again on Tuesday night. If it's Tuesday, it must be Fearless Flight Live. I hope you stay with us. This is a place to go if you have a fear of flying, or you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or if you just like to talk about airplanes, aviation, and keep up with what's going on in the aviation industry. Let me attempt to share my screen. This will be good. We'll see if we can pull this off. PowerPoint Live, okay. And I'll need one of my able-bodied assistants here to let me know if in fact I'm showing the PowerPoint.
And there it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Now,
Very good.
I think I need to put it in the slideshow mode, however, if I'm not mistaken. Play from the start.
There it is.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, again, welcome everybody. And we are glad to have any and all of you who continue to show up and support us every week. We hope you feel there's value here and keep coming back. We always want to make a comment about our birds of a feather. We're growing. You know, we've got this big treat coming up. So I'll turn it over to Elaine and see how we're doing with the membership.
We're doing great. We are at 682 members right now, and we have a giveaway coming up for the lucky 700th member. They will receive their choice of the Fearless Flight Kit or a free 60-minute coaching session with Captain Ron. So spread the word, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and who knows, one of them might be the lucky 700th member.
Cool. And the other thing we wanted to do is you started a It's Tuesday feature and put a tip out there. So you want to just share that with everybody out there?
Sure. This is our first Tip Tuesday tip. And essentially, if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming flight, be sure and allow plenty of time ahead of your boarding time to get to the airport, to park, and to clear security. By doing so, you'll give yourself a chance to relax and kind of acclimate to the airport environment because it's crazy busy, and also to prep for your flight, to listen to your harmonizer or your music, whatever you use to distract and relax yourself. But please allow plenty of time to get to the airport so you're not rushed and stressed when you get there.
Good advice. Yeah, you don't need to, anxiety tends to be cumulative. And so you don't need to add it and make yourself feel worse off there. Right. Tonight, we got a poll question again, and we got some great news this week about our local class here in Phoenix. I'm going to share that in just a minute. And then we're going to continue with our review of the How to Overcome Fear of Flying book, Chapter 8, which is about the elements of airworthiness. And we have just a very brief aviation news update, and we had a couple of questions that we're going to answer live this evening. So our poll question this week is, if you're in a tier 1 airline, and anybody who pretty much that's watching this is probably going to be on a tier 1 airline. That would be the North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, even China, Japan. Mainly the airlines that have been doing it for a long time and most likely have all of the latest safety and security updates in there. So if you're flying on one of those, your odds of dying in a crash is 1 in 33.2 million. So do you believe you might be the one? Check either yes or no. We're just curious. This is something I've watched over the years. And we'll check back. And Elaine, you can monitor that for us, I think, can't you? I hope. See if we can.
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. We're back. That is to say, the Clear for Takeoff live class in Phoenix will be resuming our Clear for Takeoff 101 class. You won't find the registration yet. We've got to reactivate that. And Dieter and I are hoping to do that later this week. So if you're anywhere in the Phoenix area, even if you've done it before and you're thinking about flying again, we'd sure love to see you for that first class back. We're going to do the entire class on the airplane. We're going to eliminate the classroom part of it like we used to have and add that time to the airplane, because it's much more appreciated by the folks who can get here to Phoenix to participate, and gives you a great chance to desensitize to the airplane. Along with that, I'm seeing a really dramatic increase in the number of coaching calls, both 15-minute free ones and paid ones. So if you haven't, and you're thinking about flying and you haven't done a 15-minute free coaching call, please consider doing that. It's easy, the price is right, and people keep telling me, unless they're just trying to make me feel good, that they feel like they've gotten value in that. So sign up for the 15-minute coaching call, and if you're anywhere near Phoenix, come on back. I had a surprise, I think it was last Friday or Saturday. The Washington Post had an article in there about some tips, tools to stay grounded when your anxiety is high, and hopefully your fear of flying won't ground you. And they mentioned myself and the FearlessFlight website there, put a link in there. It was always a great surprise, and especially with somebody who has the circulation that the Washington Post does. So I wanted to try to find that author and thank her for that personally. Okay, tonight we're going to do the Coaches Corner again. We're going to slip into that, talking about Chapter 8, which is the 8 critical elements of unworthiness. And the perception of that flying is dangerous, of course, that's the whole basis for our existence here, and it's aligned. Yeah, we mentioned in Chapter 2 that we are built to worry, okay, and that's just the nature of being human. And there are legitimate worries, worrying about losing your job, worrying about catching COVID. Those are all legitimate worries, but it's the illegitimate, if you will, worries that are the ones that create anxiety and come from phobias. And that's the category that fear of flying falls into. And you have to use logic and analysis. You have to quit relying so much on your elephant brain and rely more on your rider brain. System 2 versus System 1. Slow down your thinking, breathe. Breathe is good for not only lowering your level of arousal, but also giving you time and pause to access that more logical part of yourself. And so that's the key to getting over this. Eric, it ain't Orville and Wilbur's airplane anymore, right? Times have changed.
That's correct.
Airplanes. Yeah. I always like to think that, Orville I think Orville made the first flight there. I always like to think that that they flipped a coin and
that's what I heard. Is that not?
What's that?
That's the rumor.
Yeah, I think it was, I could see, two brothers there. Me, if it was my brother and I could see us arguing there. No, you fly it. No, you fly it. And then one of them probably said, well, you built most of it, so you get to fly it. But anyway, and great. I read a great book about the Wrights. They were quite the characters, very, very bright, very conscientious, and very they had a lot of genius in them. But they were unscrupulous when it came to the fight that they had with Curtis and who was going to get the patent for the lighter than air machine, which they ended up doing there. Okay,
I'm going to Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk in April sometime for my next shorty trip. I've never been there. Never been to the Outer Banks.
Oh wow, that'd be cool.
Oh, I've been there. It's beautiful.
I guess it is.
And another bit of trivia: the Wright Brothers' first flight would not have been able to fly wingtip to wingtip on a 747. So was not all that big.
Puts it in perspective.
What's that?
That puts it in perspective.
Oh, wow. I say that one more time. I
said that puts it in perspective.
Yes, it does.
About how long the flight was.
Yeah.
Wow.
So last week we discussed the three main reasons that commercial aviation is the safest way to travel on the planet, and that was the engines and technology, air traffic control, and human factors. So this week, we're going to look at what we call the 8 critical elements that support those 3 factors. So this is below the surface of why those 3 factors make aviation so safe there. And this is the thing I think, Eric, you probably have some comments on. Who is responsible for the airworthiness of all of our audience's flights when they get on there?
Well, we were yapping about this earlier, and the regulations from little airplanes to airliners all say the pilot in command, the aircraft commander, is in charge of the aircraft's airworthiness. However, and with a little airplane, when the pilot's the only guy there, he's it.
Yeah.
But with an airliner, with a dedicated maintenance department and split duties and all kinds of communication with the FAA, the pilot command is still responsible on a go, no-go decision on whether he takes the aircraft, but the maintenance department, in effect, is continually monitoring the maintenance of the aircraft and the airworthiness of it. As I like to say, it's not like one of my cars where it was just fine when it was purchased new, but then after I drove it around for a while, it's not so good. It's a living, breathing document, must be continually managed so that the aircraft is deemed to be airworthy and safe to go.
Yeah, and what if a mechanic says, "Hey, it's just got this little thing here. Don't worry about it," or maybe one of our supervisors, something was pressureness. Can they make us fly an airplane like that, Eric?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
And
the pilot
have
is
you?
The rules say the final authority on whether or not you're going to leave. And
yeah,
there may be some screaming and yelling from scheduling and some screaming and yelling from the mechanics, but that's okay. That's why they make earplugs.
Yeah, and I can honestly say I have never ever been pressured to take an airplane.
Yeah, I haven't either. The funny where it becomes humorous, but then everybody's sorry later. So the mechanics go, "What did you do to this perfectly good airplane? How did you break it and make my life bad?"
Yeah. And a lot of that's good-natured ribbing, because there's a little bit of rivalry.
Yes.
Their job is to fix them, and ours is to break them, kind of. But, yeah.
And there's some things, so the folks listening can understand. There's some things on an aircraft that can be broken, but the plane can still fly. It's not a no-go item.
Yep.
Perfect.
And a lot of that is because of the backup systems that we have. So we look at that. So some things, for example, would be okay to fly without, if I'm going domestic over a landmass like the North American continent, and they would not be, they would be a no-go item. I would have to get them fixed if I were going to leave the shores of the mainland and go over extended over water operation. So ETOPS, as it were. So, okay, so let's look at what those 8 elements are that we've identified. You can see them there: aircraft design and development, aircraft or air traffic and airport control, pilot training, talking about the mechanical engineers, the people, not only the mechanics that do day-to-day operations on the airplanes, but the ones that are involved in design and testing. Flight attendants, represented here by our own Diane. Aircraft maintenance in general. What role does that play in keeping making the air travel the safest way to travel in the world? And we'll look at flight operations, and we should say maybe flight non-normal operations. That's what we talk about in here, and regulations and compliance to wrap it all up. And these are all in the book, and these are quite expanded in the book. We're just going to touch on them to give you a kind of a taste, a teaser, if you will, about why you should consider getting the book if you haven't already. So why do I need to know this? Well, to be ready to fly on an airplane, you've got to understand and fully embrace these 8 critical components of airworthiness. Why? Because the human mind abhors uncertainty.
Ron, if I could just jump in for a minute.
Yeah, go
we
ahead.
have a couple people saying they cannot see the slides. Could you go full screen on the PowerPoint?
Don't tell me that I did that again.
That's okay. We
Well,
just had a couple people comment that they weren't able to see the slides.
Well, thank goodness for those people. Let me see. All right. So all I got to do is, man, it shows that it's up there. Okay. I think I know. We're gonna stop the share. Gonna make a new share. if I get that up. And I'll bet you that this fixes the operation. We shall see.
There it is.
There it is.
Yay.
There it
Okay.
is.
Okay. Eric, is it not easier to fly airplanes than it is to turn it on and off our computers?
Oh, by far. And the case in point, our chief technical officer has technical difficulties and has blown himself up.
There you go.
So
There
who
you go.
knows?
Yeah. All right. So, well, we're only halfway through, so at least we didn't lose everybody for that. All right. So back to where we were before. Of course, now I lost my notes, but that's my problem. So, all right. So I'm going to recover here quickly if I can. Just play a little traveling music here for just a few minutes, and I will find my PowerPoint. Who took my PowerPoint?
I'd sing for you guys, but then the FCC would come after me, so I'll just keep my
Yeah.
mouth shut.
Okay, you guys can still see the main screen, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Well, the viewers are still getting the desktop view.
They are.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. There it is.
Okay.
You're all set.
So it just took a little time to in the
Yeah.
transition. Okay, it's old like me. All right. So again, where were we? Why do you need to know this? Because you need to educate yourself. Why? Because your mind doesn't like uncertainty. And the elephant brain, if you remember back to chapter 2, it makes up its own story. If it doesn't know what's going on, it'll make it up. And you can see that everywhere in our culture right now. In the absence of truth, it will make up its own story. And you need to know enough about aviation and flying to demystify any myths that your elephant brain might have made up. So that's why you need to know more about these things. And so that then when you start feeling anxious, your mind just doesn't automatically leave you and go start making up these incredible stories that you all have been kind enough to share with me over the past 32 years. Okay. First one, aircraft design and development. The main reason for this in how it supports the fact that the engines and technology is so good today is there's been major design or major advancements in both the design and engine design and technology. We have fly-by-wire flight controls. Explain what fly-by-wire is, Eric.
So in the old days, like more than 20 years ago, most airplanes were controlled with pulleys and push rods that were hydraulically assisted direct mechanical linkage. And now they're controlled by electrical signals being transmitted to hydraulic powers that operate flight controls, saving the weight of all that wiring, cable, everything else, which is immense. And with a lot of backup, besides the weight, making very accurate input possible to flight controls. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah, I like to think originally when the Wright Brothers first built the airplane, it was I make an input to the flight controls, and the flight controls respond. Then we got to autopilots because pilots recognized early that they didn't want to do all that work. So then we went pilot to autopilot the flight control. And now in the era we live in now, it's pilot to computer to autopilot, and autopilot to flight control. So we keep getting more and more removed from direct control of the airplane. Of course, we can click all that stuff off and we can fly it manually, which is one of the issues that has come up in the past few years. But basically, the design and development of airplanes in the modern era made it not only safer but easier to do. And when it comes to producing airplanes, from computer to production, used to we had to build a mock-up, then a prototype, and then risk pilots' lives up there, test pilot doing that. If you were like me, grew up were a kid in the 50s and 60s, where you're really getting filled full of aviation lore and appetite, you would have seen all these old movies. They always had the one where the guy has a scarf around his neck, he makes a high-speed dive, and they show him crashing into the ground. And even then, I wasn't a pilot, but I knew that's phony. That's not why he crashed. He crashed because in the pullout he didn't have a G suit on or any pressurization, so all the blood drained to his feet and he passed out. But anyway, we don't have to worry about that anymore. The 777 was the first airplane that went directly from the computer into production. except for I think they mocked up the the cockpit or something like that. So airliners can now withstand 16 times the force of gravity. So all those of you out there worried about Mother Nature breaking up an airplane in turbulence, that's why not, because they've done that. And that shows up in the safety in the cabin in the back of the airplane as well. The key thing to remember about aircraft design is that most commercial airline accidents are not fatal. Of the 300 plus accidents worldwide since 2005, only 25% of them had fatalities at all. And when I looked at the numbers, I think it's like 95% of the people survived. So take that with your elephant brain there. All right. Airport or air traffic and airport control. We touched on this last week. Every day, the air traffic organization in the United States alone, and this is pre-COVID, but we're getting back up there now, managed about 42,000 flights and 2.5 million airline passengers across more than 29 million square miles of airspace. Gee whiz, that's a lot of airplanes, a lot of that. There's 105,000 commercial airline flights every day. And so just think about that. When you look in the news every day, you don't say, oh, another one crashed here, another one crashed there. No. And it's just so extraordinarily rare for anything to happen. We have new high-tech radars, Doppler radar to prevent wind shear, getting caught up by wind shear in the airport area, either takeoff and landing. And we have ground radar now where they can actually see us from the time we move back from the gate, or at least when we get to an entry point that's predetermined on the taxiway. So now they can watch us all the way out there in inclement weather when it's foggy and the people in the tower can't actually see via their own eyes traffic waiting out there on the ramp and taxiing around. And we've got more and better runways and landing systems and approaches. We've got all of the high tech things that we can do with GPS now, and it's just a great savior for air traffic control. Pilot training. Okay, Eric and I went through different routes. I went through the military route. And I was fortunate enough to get picked and got to fly some of the best airplanes and the best training in the world. I don't think I could have made it if I had to follow Eric's path there. So just briefly, Eric, what was your path to get into the airlines?
Well, I came up as what Ron's just being humble, what we call general aviation. And I got a private pilot's license and paid for that. And Dad helped me, and I bagged groceries, and then I got a job as what we call a line boy at the airport. I got airplanes, pulled airplanes out of the hangar, and they go, he seems like a normal deranged kid. We should hire him to flight instruct and fly charter. He'll fit right in with us. And so I gradually started flying bigger and bigger airplanes, earning a substandard living while I was doing it, but in that way, building experience, flying the bigger airplanes until you knew a person who had a friend's brother who would then hire you into a different job. And eventually, and we all got that as hands-on experience, paid for our own training. Eventually I got hired to fly a light and sent off to a professional training academy where I was my first crew con experience and learned how we train like the airlines. And I accrued enough jet time that I could start applying to the airlines, having gone through that. But it was a lengthy process, but at the same time, I assimilated an immense amount of knowledge and had a chance to observe and demonstrate stupidities that I would not recreate later in life.
Yeah. And for most pilots, a lot of fearful flyers thought that, well, how experienced do you have to be up there? They weren't aware that by the time you get to this level, it's at least what the equivalent of a master's, and I would say a doctorate, depending on what you've flown before then. The average is somewhere between 3,500 and 45 hours of experience. Do you remember how many hours you had, Eric, when you got hired?
At the time, it was fun because at the time they told, I can't tell you his name, I'll tell you later. The fun guys on the interview board when you're already hired and they come in and rip you to shreds. Yeah, right. One of the guys said, "We're having a weak moment and you are now the lowest time guy hired at this company. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "Great." And I had 3,200 hours. They were hiring so many people out of the commuters that they wanted to start hiring some corporate. And I had some jet time and all the commuter guys only had turboprop time and said, "Well, why don't we try one and see what happens?"
Yeah. And I had flown high performance single seat type airplanes. And so our flight length is not anywhere near like a transport airplane. And I was the lowest guy that was hired in the entire year in 1978. I only had 2,500 hours, but they did give me the benefit of the fact that you're doing all the jobs on your own. So they give you credit for
I bet
being-
the average guy going in now is 5,000 or 6,000 hours easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
and one thing that I get sometimes from my passengers is they're boarding the plane and they look at the pilots, and of course, because Ron and I are the same age, and all these kids look like they're not old enough to drive a car.
Right.
And they all look like babies. But the thing is, these guys and gals, a lot of them have been flying since they were 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they have been flying for a long time. Even if they look like they're babies, they're not really up in the air.
And a much higher percentage of pilots are coming out of the general aviation world. And not just because Eric's here, but a lot of the fellas that I've flown with out of general aviation, you got to really want it to do that. It takes a lot of discipline to do that. And I'm, like I said, I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to go through the military, and I was very motivated. I wanted to do this since I was in the second grade, but general aviation definitely takes a little bit more discipline. Okay, mechanical engineers, just real quick on this. These are the mechanics that we have, and we basically got three categories, I think, unless Eric adds another one. We got the aviation maintenance technical engineers. These are the guys that do you have a good feel for how to describe this? Maybe better than I can, Eric?
No, I don't quite know where you're going, but it sounds good so far.
Okay, well, the notes that I had out of our book, so it must be true, is that these are guys that kind of are across the spectrum. They may be in a factory, building and designing airplanes. They might be in what was it called? The guys that do the modifications on our own airline equipment. Those kind of guys, and so they're kind of a bridge between what's going out on the line, and they can do mechanical work on any level, but they've kind of elevated themselves to be more specialist in the design and development stage there. And then you got people who work on avionics, and that's I call that, I like to think they're the ones that make sure that the black boxes get power and are calibrated. Because you always hear about the black box in the airplane that does special things. Well, those are the guys that are specialized in that, kind of like the guys you'd take your computer to get it fixed, maybe. And then another one is advanced structures technician. These guys they know both aircraft maintenance and are familiar with sheet metal composition. When we have to put a patch on an airplane, it happens sometimes. These are the guys that beat it out in a sheet metal shop and make sure that it's meets all the specs and put it on there. And they're also the guys that check for the cracks and weaknesses in structural components, which is we talked about, if not last week, the week before. Flight attendants, we got our very own Diane here that can maybe add here. They're not your waiter or waitress. If you want to get their attention, that will do it, but probably not the kind that you're looking for. And the primary role is safety, and that gets overlooked because nothing goes wrong usually. So, you get used to what you see them in their majority role, and that is serving the public back there. But they're highly trained in safety procedures in this day and age, security, and also first aid. And they also have to have customer service skills. They get their training both hands-on and in the classroom. And like us, we have cabin simulators. We have swimming pools. Some airlines do, where they can practice ditching and do those kinds of things out there. Yeah. And here's just some of the things. Diane, we've already touched on the fact that she's one of the more mature flight attendants out there. Yes. And this was some statistics that we found when we put the book together. 2,500 flight attendant job applications received each month per airline. I imagine that's even up now with the number of furloughs and stuff out there.
Yeah, and our airline is hiring again, but a lot of the individuals who apply to be a flight attendant, they may have been applying for a year, 2 years,
right?
To different airlines. They may have gotten thanks, but no thanks. So it's not an easy career to get into, for sure.
No. And there's a stat that we got from Delta. They interviewed, or they had 44,000 apps, and they hired 1,000 people in 2019. Yeah. So it's really. You got high marks are required for all the pre-practical training, and 50% of those that make it through end up leaving the industry because of the demands and things like that. So
we started on my class on day one. We started with about 53 individuals. By the end of the first or second day, we had lost 6 or 7 already.
Yeah.
We only graduated 35, and now I'm coming up on 2 years, and now we only have 25 flying out of our initial group of 53 in the first class.
And you were just sharing with us before we started, you're now into the glamour part of the job, giving up at 3:30 in the morning.
I was explaining, everybody thinks it's so glamorous. And then I was describing when your makeup is kind of falling down your face because you've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. So you can get on your aircraft at 6 because you leave at 6:30 and you're trying to be very perky, and it's in Rapid City, South Dakota, and it's 10 degrees. And so those are the things that the general public don't really understand. And we've been on the plane for a long time before the passengers ever step foot, because we have, as Ron was talking about, all the safety things that we have to do, which are considerable. So, and
I had the pleasure of the Canadians. I love Canadians. They have a great sense of humor, and they years past they use Celsius where we use Fahrenheit. And the point at which Celsius and Fahrenheit cross is at minus 40 degrees. So we go into Canada, they get a big kick out of, they'd say, we'd say, can you give us a temperature? Because we needed that to analyze our performance. And they'd say, would you like that in Celsius or Fahrenheit? And then of course they'd say it's minus 40. So I have been in places where it's minus 40, and man, that's when the snow crunches when you walk underneath it there.
Right.
Maintenance, okay. It's the strongest maintenance program, preventative maintenance in the world, without a doubt. We have things called A check, B check, C check, and D check. A check is the lesser of the two. B, C, and D gets more intense to where you get to a D check. You're talking about maybe 4 to 6 weeks off of the line. They remove every panel that you can conceivably think about taking off of that airplane. They take everything out of the interior. They check for cracks. They check for using non-destructive methods like ultrasound and X-ray. And in addition to that, every airplane's got to have a check every 24 hours. And before you take that airplane, you've got to sign off. Somebody has got to sign off in maintenance that airplane is airworthy. Literally, there is an airworthiness certificate every day that somebody flies that. And when you take the logbook, you certify that you have checked it and made sure that it has that airworthiness certificate. And that's how we could fly an airplane for 20 years, and you can't drive your car more than 3 if you live in the Chicago area, for example, because the rocker panels are all rusted out because they get such good maintenance, okay? And the main reason airplanes actually go into retirement is when we have a downturn, like Eric basically out of a job because they retired all the 757s because they just couldn't justify the cost of maintenance anymore, and they didn't need all that many airplanes, so they moved on. Flight ops, okay, just a quick word about this. These are all the non-normal operations that these are normal and non-normal, but we wanted to talk here, just extract from the book the non-normals there. And what's a non-normal, Eric? I cheated and put the thing up on the screen. It says emergency. Is that a big deal for us?
Well, we always throw these words around. An emergency is a thing we tell air traffic control if we need priority to land, to get priority handling. But we refer to the situation as a non-normal, a normal or a non-normal, and we tell the flight attendants we're either going to make a precautionary landing, which means we have a situation on, but we anticipate a normal landing, or we're going to make an emergency landing where we don't know how it's going to turn out and or if an evacuation will be necessary. So we switch up these terms, talking to the flight attendant, each other, or ATC. But all of our examples of where we might make either we would always declare an emergency, where we'd make a precautionary landing, or in emergency landing. Well, for example, pilot incapacitation, that'd be a precautionary landing. The other guy can land the airplane, take care of everything, taxi it in, make sure medical help is available there for his partner, that kind of thing. Aircraft damage, well, who knows? If you don't know the extent of it, that may or may not be an emergency. You may need to evacuate. Others up here with the engine failure, malfunction, that sort of stuff, probably a non-normal or a fire, that's probably an emergency landing. You don't know if you can contain it or not, and if you'll have to evacuate in the landing. So they can split, even though it's a non-normal situation, it can kind of split at that fork, whether it's going to be an
the difference there for us, when you guys make that determination, is that you all are going to tell us in the cabin, the flight attendants, whether or not it's going to be an evacuation, which means it's right on, it may be on the runway in a taxiway, open the doors in an emergency method, blow the slides if there's slides in the aircraft, or if it's precautionary, we get to the gate, the jet bridge comes out, maybe whatever, and then we have what's called an expedited deplaning, which we get everybody off real fast. We leave all the bags, everybody get off the plane, but we're not on the runway or the taxiway.
And this is something that changed during my career and Eric's career. And it was basically primarily for managing the expectations of the flight attendants so that they knew when to prepare, when they could expect the brace command and all that, and possibly have to do an emergency evac, or when they could expect to more than likely go to the gate.
Exactly. That makes a big difference for us.
Yeah. Because we don't want people bailing out. We don't want the flight attendants not knowing what's going on in the back there, because they're responsible for it. Okay. And then finally, regulations and compliance. What can I say? Rules, rules, and more rules. And this is not to mention safety programs like FOQA and ASAP. And you want to just review the safety programs like ASAP that we talked about, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, Eric?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Oh, you review that now?
I was just going to say, highlight it, basically where we can tell on ourselves and get, we give up good feedback and stay out of trouble, hopefully.
The FAA used to rule with a hammer. So we would do to the best of our ability to hide everything for the carpet, so we didn't get cut and get hit with a hammer. And if we see a problem or have a problem, or possibly something we've done, if we own up to it, then we have a major protection through this ASAP program, whereby we can be maybe spared a violation, that sort of thing, and point out a deficiency in the system. And the FAA is allowed to see a trend like, gee, every Tuesday or every Tuesday, somebody's sending in one of these things, and it's this exact same problem. We do something to address that so that it does not happen. It's been has resulted in a radical improvement in safety.
And we have that as well. Flight attendants.
Yeah, they're right. The flight attendants participate as well. And the reason this came out is when you're, no matter what kind of industry you're in, you're always trying to predict the next problem area, right? And with aviation, it's where could we have an accident? Where are we vulnerable? Well, the problem is it got so safe that we don't have many dots on the map anymore, which is a good thing, right? We don't want to be breaking airplanes and hurting people, but it becomes really hard to predict. So when they quit punishing us and open their arms to the feedback when we would make mistakes that maybe were inconsequential and nobody knew about it other than myself and my helper on the flight deck, then we started getting data that could be potential accidents, if you will, or potential incidents. And so that's the beauty of this. And that's why it's the safest way to travel on the planet. Above and beyond technology, I firmly believe that is the best thing that ever happened. And the healthcare industry, because they were and still do kill up to 400,000 people every year due to patient mistakes, they started to adapt and come over and pay attention to aviation and say, how do you do that? What do you do in all that? And they've made the medical industry safer as well. So, all right, that brings us to the key takeaways there. You can read through those if you got the book. If you don't have the book, get the book. You know, it's available on Amazon or where fine books are sold, I'm told. So take a look at that. I do think I know I'm biased, but I think it's a great resource. It's easy to read. You can pick it up anywhere and read whatever part you want. You don't have to go cover to cover on it. And you can start with your areas of interest and then expand on that. The other thing I want to make a quick shout out for tonight is take a look at our Fearless Flight hub over there. And it's you can see that it's standard http:// it's flf.link/hubs. Take a look at that. If you don't have the harmonizer, for example, when you get to the harmonizer here, which is one of the checks, you won't be able to access that. But I'm going to come out with a video that talks about the harmonizer in much greater detail. And maybe Elaine, you can put that in the show notes there if you can access that for us. But This is where you can also join the Birds of a Feather.
Yes.
You can get a free downloadable expert's guide to turbulence and takeoff. There's a lot of good stuff in here and a lot of good stuff coming. You can see there. And so please take a look at that. Dieter went to a lot of trouble to create that there. Okay, one last pitch for the Birds of a Feather. If you haven't joined, please join, because if you're the lucky number 700, we got a bonus for you, and we'd like to have anybody who isn't a member now go ahead over there and join. Okay, we're running over. I think I'm going to forego on the questions, and we'll save those for next week.
I was just gonna say, should we promise? I think Dave, who asked about fuel.
Yeah, I will communicate with David directly. And thank him for bringing that in there. But we'll save the questions till next week.
He asked about fuel and rudder problems, and they were actually pretty interesting.
Yep, they are. You'll want to stay tuned for next week. And I wanted to have a quick shout out. This is the only thing we had in aviation news. Tragic story. This young woman, you know, we always talk about the chances of the odds of getting hit by lightning, the odds of dying in a plane crash and things like that. And most of us, and we haven't seen any of the survey or the poll question responses yet, but most of us, we're creatures of possibilities rather than creatures of probabilities. So that's why we don't have much of a grasp. Our elephant brain just has a hard time wrapping itself around 1 in 33.2 million. Or 1 in the 11 million, or whatever the odds are. Here's a tragic. This is a top surfer down in El Salvador who was out there. Apparently there were thunderstorms in the area, and she got hit by a lightning bolt on the beach, and it was fatal to her. And I mentioned this not to drag us down and be a bummer on this, but just to show you that there are legitimate worries out there, and then there are illegitimate worries, if you will. And you can have the same thing. I mean, there's legitimate concerns about airplanes and flying, but we have 118 years now since the Wright Brothers' first flight. It's not their airplane anymore. It's not their airspace anymore. And the reason it's so safe is because of the things we've talked about: engines and technology, air traffic control, and human factors. And so the legitimate worries about that, it's an illegitimate worry for you to sit in the back and worry about us doing something wrong, okay? Because you can't control it, even if we did make a mistake. But what you need to know is look at, even though we don't think in terms of probabilities, you can't ignore those. It is the safest way to travel on the planet, and we spend every week trying to convince you more and talk about the reasons why it is so safe out there. Okay, next week you want to make sure you come back because we're going to talk about turbulence. That is the number 1 or number 2 fear for people out there. Everybody wants to know, why is it bumpy? And I'm doing a lot of coaching again now, as I said, and people are saying, why did I turn the kill the show, or are you still seeing?
Yes, it still says live.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We're still live. We're still live.
I was wondering if our mugs were back up there, just to kind of close it. But yeah, anyway. So we're going to talk about turbulence, and everybody wants to know, how do I beat turbulence? Is there ever a day when I can fly when there isn't any turbulence? Forget that. I don't want you worried about that. That's our job up there. What I want you to do is make peace with turbulence and with your anxiety. You want that to be your best friend. And because believe it or not, that's the way you operate your car. You don't sit there in your car paralyzed about whether or not there's going to be chuck holes in the road or things like that, because you've gotten used to it. You amp yourself up and you calm yourself down. So that's what we're about in Fearless Flight. And that's why we do tell you some content things about airplanes and flying and why it's so safe to do that. But we really want you to get comfortable making peace with yourself. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Elaine. And thanks to you all.
You're
out there
welcome.
For watching. And we hope to see you back next week for Fearless Flight Live. Thanks and have a great week.
Tune in, Dave, and we will answer your questions first because we're talking about earlier today, and we're not going to let you go. We just ran over it.
Mr. Conscientious is right on top.
Very conscientious.
Bye.